Good afternoon. I'm Imogen Bakra and welcome to this COP26 debrief, giving you bite-sized insight on the latest COP26 discussions and developments. Yesterday was Energy Day, where the discussions focused on the measures needed to accelerate the global transition to clean energy. I'm joined today by our climate and ESG specialist, Caroline Hatz, who's on the ground at COP26 to hear her key takeaways. So Caroline, what further commitments to the clean energy transition renewables have you heard about?
Well, I have to say yesterday was incredibly exciting, and NatWest joined in one of those announcements, which was the Power Past Coal Alliance, which was sort of attracting 28 new members, including obviously NatWest, HSBC, the Export Development Company or Agency of Canada. And the intent is very much sort of, to eradicate the use of coal by 2030 and therefore reduce our exposures. The 28 counterparts make up about $17 trillion in assets across 150 members. And, it's very much focused on stopping lending to those sectors and that we will be phasing that out. We had obviously made that announcement anyway, unless there was a credible transition plan by the end of 2021. And here the official statements are as of by October 2024, with a global phase out by 2030 globally. The other thing that was obviously really, really important was 190 countries and organizations that joined together to very much end the use of coal or the support of coal power. At least 23 nations made new coal commitments, and that included countries like Vietnam, Poland, South Korea, Egypt, Singapore, Chile, and the Ukraine. And this was then called the New Global Coal to Clean Power Transition Statement. Unfortunately, there's always some slight sad points to this, that neither China nor the US joined that force. But obviously, we hope that in the future they will reconsider. The other one was that 25 countries said that they will end international public support for unabated fossil fuels by the end of 2022, which again is great because it's coming up so quickly. It was one of the comments that I made a couple of days ago, is that, the timelines are becoming shorter. We're not sort of focused anymore on 2050, but things that are much more in our control. And this came on top of other announcements by China, Japan, and South Korea to end overseas coal financing, which means all significant public international financing for coal power has effectively ended. So I think, we are moving in the right direction. The devil will be in the detail. And obviously it will now be to actually deliver those commitments versus just making the statements.
Sure. So are there any other kind of emerging clean energy trends or new technology that you've been hearing about?
So yes, so it's fascinating. I think it's great to see hydrogen is very much being talked about actively. Obviously, green hydrogen is the goal where you use renewable energy to produce that hydrogen versus gas or natural gas. Actually, as you walk through the facilities here or the conference center, you will see a hydrogen-powered ambulance. At our event yesterday, there was a small hydrogen car that was put on display in front of the terracotta exhibit. So you can really feel there's sort of excitement around hydrogen. At a table that I was at, there was definitely that discussion, the tension to some extent between electricity or e-vehicles, electrical vehicles, and hydrogen-powered vehicles. And, I think what we're realizing is that we can't really get ourselves too focused on one form of renewable or new technology. It is going to be a mix of different technologies, and that will also tend to infer which industry you're in. Whereas, hydrogen is very usable in larger operations. It becomes slightly more complicated in smaller consumer type instruments that would use hydrogen. So I think this is where it's important to really keep an open mind of the different technologies. In addition, John Kerry yesterday had also announced, in conjunction with the World Economic Forum, it was called the First Movers Coalition, where members will make purchasing commitments that support the development of early stage technologies across the following industries. And again, this is really, really important. The industries include steel, cement, aluminum, chemicals, shipping, aviation, trucking, and any kind of direct air capture sectors. Some of the members were, for example, A.P. Møller, Amazon, Boeing, Vattenfall, and Volvo. And really the intent is so that you're kind of starting to influence the supply chain. And so the members committed to using sustainable aviation fuels and zero emissions shipping technologies by 2030. Similarly, shipping cargo owners are targeting to transport at least 10% of goods via zero emission ships and get up to 100% by 2040. So I think, again, this just sort of highlights how we are starting to shift supply chains and the actual source of fuel generation that we will be using.
So you mentioned earlier that the timelines have gone from looking at kind of 2030 or 2050 to much nearer term. But obviously what comes out of COP26 this year will shape the energy sector outlook for decades to come. So what do you think that this could mean for restructuring in the industry?
So it comes back a little bit to what I just said, actually, also around the supply chains. Ultimately, we're going to be using different forms of renewable energy to drive some of the production where we have used fossil fuels or coal-fired electricity beforehand. And so this switch is going to have a huge impact on the type of jobs, the skills, the university courses that students will be going to. There's going to be a serious change throughout the system. It's like Alison Rose refers to, it's the rewiring of the global economy. And I think we really can sort of highlight that across this. This will have enormous implications. In addition, yesterday there were discussions around the carbon markets, and it was specifically focused on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And it's interesting because obviously that's another new sector that's going to develop, is a much more liquid, fluid carbon market globally. And the negotiations actually were discussing if a percentage of the trading revenues would actually be sort of granted to poor countries for their transition to kind of adaptation and mitigation tools to combat climate change. And the EU at this point in time is against it, but obviously the negotiations are continuing. So again, it sort of highlights how we are moving into completely new territory and new opportunities, new financial instruments that will be really exciting to be part of.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a super exciting and interesting time for the industry. All right, well, that's all for this COP26 videocast. Thank you, Caroline, for those fresh insights from COP26, and thank you, viewers, for joining us. Just a reminder that if you'd like more views and actionable ideas on the trends shaping the business landscape, please subscribe to our social channels. See you again soon.